Excellent. Okay, so thank you everyone for joining. This is the Data-Driven Digital webinar, the remote edition. I don't know whether it was meant to be remote because some of them we are doing remote, but this one is remote out of necessity, out as most of us are in lockdown at the moment. So I think there's a few people from our team that aren't in lockdown, Selina being one. She's lucky enough to be doing this talk tonight and then going off on holiday somewhere nice other than her house, which is a real luxury. And we've also got Lisa, who is just out of lockdown, I think, tonight, maybe at midnight or something like that. Yeah, lucky you. So we'll all be jealous for the next few hours of you. So today, I'm just going to take you through the introduction slides as usual. So most of you know me already. My name's Paul Hewitt, and I'm the commercial director and partner in Marketing We Trust, and the host of these events for approximately 2 years now. So I think in that time, we've probably had around 20 different speakers and topics. Some of those events have been in our office in Sydney and in partners' offices, and many online, and even one in Singapore. So this event is about sharing the latest thinking on data-driven digital marketing. So that's our aim, is to always bring you cutting-edge topics and cutting-edge speakers. Not to put on too much pressure there, Selina, but you are cutting edge. And the purpose of this group, just a reminder, is that we were at a Google, this started off as a Google meetup. So Ben and I were at a Google partners, a GMP partners meeting in San Francisco. I think it was back in late 2018 or early 2019. And one of the things we discovered was that a lot of the information that was being shared with us over a 2 or 3 day period wasn't being shared with many digital marketers who are on the ground. And we inquired about this with our contacts at Google, and there was no real forum for sharing the information we were getting as partners to our customers. So on that trip, we made it our mission to come back and set up this seminar for people in Sydney and people in Singapore. And since then, that's what we've been doing. So the purpose of this event is to share digital marketing expertise. It's to share digital tool and product knowledge. So whether it's GA, Google Ads, Optimize, Tag Manager, or whether it's a wider tool outside of the Google environment. And it's also to build a community of digital marketers. So we've done that well. We've got a great community now. We obviously don't see them all at this event. We've got, I think it's around 1,500 members in total. Some people come to this event, but some people choose to consume the content in video format after, or they choose to just read the blogs that we produce out of this content after. So we've got a great community, and it's always nice to see faces that we've seen before. So in terms of the sponsor, obviously this event is sponsored by Marketing We Trust. Unfortunately, we can't provide goodies like snacks and alcohol like we do in the real events. But hopefully the content is good enough to make up for that. In terms of what we do as a business, we're an enterprise digital marketing agency. So we work across the wide range of online marketing, all the way from measurement. So that is analytics, tag management, reporting through Data Studio, through to growth, SEO, search ads, display ads, and then conversion rate optimization. So an open invitation as usual. If you know anyone who you want to hear from, please send them our way. We've had some great external speakers in the past, people from Vodafone, people from Telstra. Those are just a couple of recent speakers that we've had. So if you know anyone who's doing something different, please recommend them to me, and I can have a conversation with them, or Kirsty can have a conversation with them. And we can try and get them on board for one of our speaking slots. And finally is a quick request to give us a Google review. We ask this every time, and we don't get much of an uptake on it. So I really would appreciate if everyone on this call could make, if you haven't done so already, actually, I've seen a few of you have done. If you can make the effort just to give us a 5-star review, it does mean a lot to us, and it obviously helps us with our local rankings. So finally, from me, that is anyway, I'm going to hand over to our head of growth, Selina, who is going to talk to you today about first-party world problems. Selina, can I hand over to you?
Absolutely. Let me just take the screen off you. Alrighty. I'm assuming everyone can see that. Do I have thumbs up or a verbal yes? That's the right one.
Yeah, I can see the wrong one.
Yes, correct. All good? Perfect.
Perfect.
Alrighty. So kind of what we're talking through today, thank you, Paul, for the introduction, is first-party data. So kind of go over, I suppose, why it actually matters to business owners and us as marketers, and then kind of going through examples of different types of first-party data that is accessible to pretty much anyone at this point, how to actually collect that information, and how to kind of use it for good. So we'll jump straight into it. For those who don't know me, I figured I'd give a bit of a recap on how you got here today to spend your Wednesday night with me. So in 1992, Bill Clinton was elected president. And if you want to start doing the math, it is the year that I was actually born. If we go to 2012, Hurricane Sandy devastated the states in the Caribbean, and that is the year that I started in SEO. If you go to 2014, the Ebola epidemic was classed as a health crisis. And that's when I kind of started to dabble into SEO and paid advertising and performance marketing. In 2015, I do apologize, there's 12 intro slides about me, so really kind of straddle in there for me. So NASA confirmed that there was actually water on Mars, and that year is when I decided to silo myself into performance marketing. In 2018, Trump triggered a trade war, and I started to move into more of a digital strategy kind of role. And then last year, 2020, honestly can't really think of anything super significant. But for me, I did join In Marketing We Trust as the head of growth. So now we got that out of the way, I just kind of want to give us a bit of a rewind before we get too far into things about what we're actually talking about today. So as we can see here, there are 3 different categories of data, and I'm just going to run you through them super quickly. So first-party data is obviously what we're talking about today. So this is the data that you guys own as business owners, and you can manage about your customers. If we go to second-party data, this is data that is first-party data for other resources, but we can utilize for marketing efforts. So a perfect example of that is Facebook advertising. So Facebook owns all the information that they have, and we as advertisers use that for actual advertising, but we don't own it. And then lastly, you got third-party data. So this is aggregated information about different audience sources. And an example of that would be accessing the Google Display Network. So it's multiple different sources, whether it's contextual, whether it's the way that they behave on different websites, whether it's just general interest, and we can access that as advertisers and businesses. So why it actually matters to you guys, there's actually a lot of reasons for it. So if we move straight into it, so from a data compliance perspective, there's very minimal risk for us as business owners. I'm sure everyone's aware that it is a hot topic at the moment about the way that businesses are actually using data. And there are obviously some pretty heavy fines getting around at the moment. So from a data compliance perspective, it really does give us as business owners and marketers that security to use it. From a quality perspective, there is a lot of questions about the likes of Google and the other conglomerates about the quality of the data that we do have accessible for us. If you ever look at Google Analytics and look at your audiences and the affinities and in markets, it can get pretty questionable sometimes. So actually having the quality control on your side, because it's data that you have collected yourself and you fully understand how you've got that and the quality of it. From an accuracy perspective, so you understand, obviously, as you collected it, you know that the quality of it, and then you know it is accurate because it is very much one-to-one. So you understand the source that's come from, and it is a trusted source. And then from a relevancy perspective, so if you do collect it in a correct way and you do use it in the correct way, which we'll go into a little bit further, you have greater insight into the relevancy of the specific audiences, so you can use it later on in ways that are actually applicable to your business. Cost effectiveness. So there is a lot of work that actually goes into first party data, and a lot of companies are actually investing quite heavily in this space at the moment. But long term, it is actually very cost effective to use your own data and your own customer base, because it does provide quite strong return on investment results, which we'll go into shortly. And lastly, it is future proofing for the third party apocalypse. So I don't know if anyone here has attended my last session, but 2022, sorry, was when third-party cookies were meant to disappear. That was recently updated to be prolonged again, but at this point is really kind of, I guess, protecting your business today. So when that day does come that we no longer have the third-party data that we use today, you already have the foundation set for success moving forward. So if you're still not convinced, I have prepared a hell of a lot of graphs and a hell of a lot of data to convince you otherwise. So if we go through the three different key sources of different types of data, so like I mentioned, the third-party data is aggregate information. The benefit of it is there's a lot of it, especially right now, maybe not long-term, but the value of it and the quality to you as a business to you actually use, it is quite low. Then when we go to the second-party data, it's a little bit step up, where the volume of it may be less, but still the quality is in question. And then first party is, it is depending on how much you can scale your capabilities of collecting that first party data, it can be quite low, but the quality of it is immense. And that is why obviously we're here today, because this is where a lot of businesses are investing. And this is where a lot of businesses are actually seeing a lot of success today by using it. So some studies that I found, so when we look at the different types of data sources and those kind of things and businesses, so this was 275 different respondents, we did find that the majority of people, which I'm sure is not a massive surprise, actually found that the first party data provided the strongest return on investment. Now, like I said, scalability is in question about how you actually collect that information. And I would also say that quite a big caveat to most of my presentation today is about how you actually use that information to provide the return on investment that you need. But generally speaking, it does provide some really strong results for businesses. And when we're looking at the other benefits that businesses have identified by using this type of information is really around, if you look at the first one, like it's pretty obvious that first party data is the best type of data the businesses are using. But they found that it improved the quality of the other sources that they had. So as an example, if you're using a customer database, you're uploading it to Google, you're uploading it to Facebook, and you're creating lookalikes off that, it naturally will increase the quality of traffic that you're actually advertising to. When we think about return on investment, again, it makes sense from a financial perspective to really invest in the space. It does increase your customer lifetime value if you use it correctly. So a perfect example of that is if you have a database of people, you have a subscription-based model and a renewal period comes up, actually targeting those people to bring them back on board is where you're really going to benefit from using that data. And then the last one is really the insights around your customers. So if you collect the right type of information, you have some pretty good visibility in terms of who they are, what they're interested in, where they are, etc. So we can use that through pretty much any marketing platform. And I thought this was quite interesting because I have spoken to quite a few companies, and a concern that they have is the level of investment that they require based on the size. So a lot of companies would say, you know, the bigger guys can actually afford to invest in this particular space to collect this type of information and have the infrastructure in place to do it. But I guess what I really want to kind of send home in this particular slide is it doesn't matter what size you are, this is a crucial element to any kind of business and any type of marketing moving forward. So looking into it, with the third-party update that was last year, which is delayed, is a lot of businesses kind of looked at the way that they're investing their budgets and what they need to do to shift to kind of accommodate the change that is inevitable with this type of data. And we can see that the majority of people are actually going to start investing and emphasizing in this particular space to kind of really set them up now, so that when that day does come, they do have the foundations in place already. And then what I thought was quite interesting about this particular study was that even though all these businesses do have it in place, it is still very not underutilized by comparison. So when you look at the third-party audiences, only 6% isn't utilized at all, whereas, you know, first-party is 11%. So I guess the key takeaway from this information is, even though we have all these businesses that are starting to shift their priorities and how they're collecting this information, they're still not using it effectively. And that's kind of really the key here is you can easily, well, I say easily, but we can get to a point from a competitive perspective that you can actually supersede if we have these companies that aren't using it at all. So some examples of the first party data. Obviously, there's a lot we can kind of go through. So I don't want to bore you too much in this information. But when we look at it, so behavioral data, so a perfect example of this is, I'm sure everyone's familiar, it's Google Analytics and those kind of things. So actually tracking that information about how they engage with your business on your website, you know, where they've come from and all those kind of things, it really is your information to use as you need to. So that kind of sits in one particular hub. When we look at in-store purchases, so in-store purchases, if you can obviously connect it, is really where we need to go, where you can start to understand geographically, you know, some demographics might perform better than others. Some capital cities or what might it be will actually perform better for certain services and products themselves. So really trying to connect, I suppose, your POS systems and understand what people are buying, how they're buying it, if they're doing multiple products. And if you can collect that type of information, you get a better insight into what products are actually going to perform best for a business and how you can actually formulate your marketing strategy around those things. Subscription data, so perfect example is obviously Netflix. But yes, if people are giving you their email, they're giving your name, whatever it might be, that will be housed with you. And that's kind of really the information that you can hold as business owners as your first party data. And then your social followers. So the great thing about this is you can actually understand how they interact with your different posts and the type of content you're pushing out through social media. And again, that really kind of will dictate what you do internally and externally from a marketing perspective to understand what content people are engaged with, how they're actually consuming it. You can also identify, you know, their particular interests, what type of behavior they have, as well as their different preferences. CRM data, I feel it's pretty obvious, but all these data points can kind of feed in. So depending how you actually structure your CRM and what type of information you stipulate that it should actually store, but you can collect, you know, any kind of PII, which we class as first party, to understand who they are, where they are, if you use it for lead gen, whatever it might be. And then that kind of information you can obviously export and connect, as an example, Salesforce with different social platforms to really kind of understand who your customer is and how to target them. Survey data is a great one. So this is something that you would own. So understanding, again, this is really based on how you structure your questions and your actual surveys. So if you have a specific objective as a business to kind of, I guess, segment your different audiences, that's what should really dictate your survey data. So when you have that information, it's very easy for you to kind of filter through, segment it as you need to. And then that way you have that information at hand to use for other reasons. cross-platform. So that's, how people actually navigate and behave when they move across different platforms. So it could be native apps, it could be your mobile site or a desktop web page. And lastly, customer feedback. So in store or online, it doesn't really matter. But this can include comments on your website, the phone calls if you have the data points set up internally, direct messages on social media. And again, a lot of people do use this type of information to kind of understand who your happy customers are, so you can actually try to remarket back to them, but also understand who isn't happy with you. So the information you can quite easily use from this is how to convert them to become a loyal customer to you guys. And obviously the efforts that you put behind that, the budgets and the actual messaging would be very different to those who love you. So how we actually collect this information, and a lot of businesses just jump forward and kind of understand that they have a lot of different data points and those kind of things and start collecting. But before any kind of business does do that, the main thing we need to think about is you actually need a strategy to actually execute this. So the first point is, what actual inventory and data points do you have at hand? So if we go through kind of what I've mentioned just previously, do you have analytics installed? Do you have CRM data? Are they all connected? What are your social media profiles like? And really understand what you have at hand that you can actually access. The next point is, and I think this is one of the most important parts of today's talk and in the subject matter itself, is what do you actually need? And something that our head of analytics, Benoit, who is here at the moment, always talks about is, what are you actually going to use it for? Because there is no point in collecting information about people that you're never going to utilize. So based on the business goal or the objective that you have, what are you actually going to use it for? Because that will really dictate what you're going to do moving forward and how you collect it and how you do use it. Ooh, there it is. There we go. And housing your data. So let's say you've said you understand what you have at hand, what you actually need from those different data sources. You got to house it somewhere. So actually having a single source where you can import all the information and actually use it practically and connect it with other sources to use for marketing objectives or for decision-making purposes is the most important thing, where you can kind of aggregate everything together. And then collect it. So that's obviously pretty straightforward. And allowing enough time to get a substantial amount of significant data is probably the key here. There is no point in making drastic business decisions on minimal data. So really trying to understand how much you need to actually make a call on that. And lastly, test and learn and obviously refine. So in Marketing We Trust, we do run off a 70-20-10 model where we understand that 70% of our work is very foundational and those kind of things, and that's what we do day to day. But we do have a 20 and 10 methodology where we do look at it and understand that we need to be able to be agile and shift the way that we're doing things to try to get growth or scale or whatever our client's objective is. So exactly the same here, where we understand that you might collect a particular data source, let's say it's through Facebook, and you actually test those audiences with the message that your original goal was when you think about step 2 in terms of what your actual strategy is. And if it isn't effective in those kind of things, you need to be able to go back to step 2 and really understand who do you actually need based on the objective that you need. And it is very much an ongoing process where you need to continuously branch out and try new messaging, new type of audiences, new different data sources to continuously create a robust first-party data source. So now we have that, we got the strategy in place. Now it's actually time to start collecting. And something I found quite relevant or quite interesting is based on the different business verticals, who already has it at hand versus who actually needs to start focusing on it. So as you can see here at the top there, as you got the automotive industry and consumer products, where they have anywhere from no access to little to indirect access to actually that first party data. Whereas we have things like travel and leisure, financial services and retail, where you're going to have it when we think about POS systems through online transactions and those kind of things. So understanding where you are now will really dictate, I suppose, what you need to collect and how you do collect it. So when we think about it, the different type of sources that you have, this is quite interesting in terms of how people are typically collecting that information. So the first protocol is website. I think this is naturally the most cost effective, especially when you have tools like Google Analytics at hand. If you have our retail, obviously point of sale, but if not, CRM as well. So really trying to identify, again, those data sources that you have and start collecting it. But the most common ones are website pixels, like I mentioned. So actually having a pixel in place, regardless of what it is, whether it's Google Analytics or Facebook or whatnot, and really start to pull in that information and collect it over time to really understand who your consumer is, how they behave, and what type of actions they have on your website or with your business. Next one being CRM. So really looking at all the different data points that you have and how you can actually collect that information to kind of store it. And obviously CRMs have a lot of different uses within a business, whether it's lead gen, sales, or whatnot. But what I really want to highlight here is, the marketing, products and service areas is really where a lot of businesses are investing, and the market intelligence. So like I mentioned, if you have a sample of users and you've collected the right information, you have more insight into who they are, what life stage are they at, and who your ideal target market is. And lastly is a DMP. So like I mentioned, it is important to house this information somewhere, and a DMP does do that. So it can collect a variety of different sources, and it can be collected for you to actually organize and centralize your data management platform to really understand who your customer is and how to use them effectively. So as for example, you may not want to target the same ad to myself as you would Paul, because we are very different people. We have very different life stages and those kind of things. So having a DMP will dedupe information, will allow you to collect it in one hub so you can use it from a business insight perspective and marketing decision-making perspective as well. So using your data for good, and I think that's kind of part of the theme at my last talk, is it's all well and good to use this or collect this information, but I think there are a lot of businesses out there, when we think about Facebook and Google and stuff like that have betrayed a lot of users' trust, which really does come into the compliance perspective and GDPR and those kind of things. So it's really about making sure that the way that you are using the information that you are collecting is actually for the right reasons, as opposed to just exploiting essentially your consumers. So the key thing that from a consumer's perspective and how we talk to them and how we want to provide a value exchange and actually collect that information is make sure that we're actually providing something to them. I don't think anyone here tonight or here in general would actually voluntarily give their information if they didn't think they were going to get something back for it or see an improvement in their online experience. So it's really about making sure that we as businesses appear as trusted partners with them, and that we're not going to use them or exploit the information that they do provide us. Right. Cool. So this is some content from my last one, so I apologize for anyone who was here, but it does kind of touch base on some examples here. So as businesses, we need to convey a clear value proposition to them for actually asking for information that they're willing to provide. So a key example would be providing convenience to them. So I know, as an example, JD, as in the shoe store, they have my information purely because I want to understand when specific shoes that I'm currently looking at are in stock if they're out of stock. So that from my perspective, I'm willing to give that information and sign up with them purely because I want to understand from a convenience perspective when I want to buy something, if it is available. Deals or coupons, that's obviously a super easy one. If you have a sale on or whatever it is, a lot of time businesses are requesting that you actually provide information to retrieve that. So it's obviously pretty straightforward. So as loyalty programs, if people need to physically sign in, I think Woolworths has done obviously a great job at this, is creating accounts with them to actually access the loyalty programs that they do have. And lastly, mobile apps. So if people are actually downloading your physical app, if you do have one, naturally information is typically provided there. And I guess from us as marketers and business owners or whatnot, it is really what we can do with this information is predict purchasing behavior. So, for anyone who has an e-commerce store and those kind of things, is collecting that information. A perfect example is cart abandoners. So as you can see, 96% of people will leave a site without actually purchasing. And it really is about the touch points that follow that process. So, it could be 11 different touch points it would take before someone buys a pair of shoes in this example. And it is about collecting that information and understanding that an individual has shown interest in a product and how we can actually use that to predict that they're probably going to purchase later on. And that's when, things like dynamic retargeting really kind of kicks in, where, naturally we can target people based on the content that they view, the products that they've viewed historically, if there's an upsell, cross-sell opportunity, and obviously cart abandoners as well. Audience insights is a great one. So, if you house all this information, it's kind of like, what do you do with it other than just targeting people? And it is about how you segment that information. So, trying to understand, let's say you want to target people who are renters versus homeowners versus whatever else, and investors. Naturally, you're going to figure out who your best segments are, the best return on investment that you're going to get for them, and how you actually invest accordingly to actually provide the best results. And once you have that information, you really are able to hit them quite hard from a content perspective and provide them relevant ads accordingly. And another key thing is how you're actually maximizing your marketing budget. So you collected all this information, you've segmented it correctly, you've tested ad messaging that is relevant for each individual segment that you do have. And that really is how I personally look at it as almost like a lever function. So understanding that if you push more money into a particular segment audience with a particular asset type or creative, you're going to provide a certain result that might be more profitable than others. So it really is about trying to push money where you can to really get the most budget that you can from the data that you have collected. And this is quite an interesting one that was conducted in 2019. So they looked at the level of maturity that businesses do have when they look at the first party data infrastructure that they have internally. And there's a reason, there's actually a step before here, which is nascent, but only one person in the study was actually classed as nascent. So it's quite promising to see that, people are already working through this process of understanding that they need first party data and how they actually use it. So you can see here that, naturally everyone's kind of got the bare essentials in place, but it really is about how, we as businesses and marketers can kind of move down this process. And it's more important now than ever, really, to become more mature with the first party data and now how we use it. So, like I mentioned at the very beginning, it is not just about collecting the information, it's about using it in the right way to actually get the best results. And then from an organizational perspective, how you actually activate it. So, there is one thing to collect it, but it's about also setting up measurements in place. So like I mentioned, it's about testing and refining ongoing. So if you set up clear KPIs that you have for your first party data, you're actually able to measure the success of it, and then integrate it, automate it within your technology. So, a perfect example would be to run a particular audience through Google. As an example, you run specific messaging on a light budget. If it does get to a point that you have refined it well enough that you have the right people and the right messaging, why wouldn't you apply it for the rest of your marketing activities? It can be email, YouTube, social, it doesn't matter what it is, but you've already figured out what is the best recipe for success based on that audience type. So I know I've kind of touched on a lot of things and I don't know why the GIF is very slow. But I suppose the main thing that I would recommend people take away from tonight's conversation is really this one slide. And I think in my experience, and I'm sure a lot of people could probably relate to it, is people really do kind of miss those first two steps. A lot of people are collecting information. A lot of people are kind of pumping it through different platforms and all this kind of things. But if you don't actually fully understand what tools you have in the chest and what tools you actually need to use, essentially it's not good value to our consumers. And again, that's really what the key element here is. If we're offering this information to businesses, we want to make sure that they use it correctly. So having a strategy in place and a measurement and scalable framework in place as well is where businesses are really going to succeed. And that's my talk for tonight.
Awesome. Thank you, Selina. I'll give you a round of applause. I'm sure everyone else is as well. We have got a couple of questions coming through. So the first one is from Matt, who has asked, apart from lookalike audiences, how can you leverage first-party data for your acquisition?
Yeah, so other than that, like obviously, things like email marketing and those kind of things, naturally, that would really kind of feed into it if we're thinking purely from a database perspective. But like I mentioned after, kind of at the tail end of the presentation, is understanding who it is and what kind of messaging conveys best for them. Is kind of really where you're going to find acquisition opportunities, predominantly, especially if it is like a repeat purchase type of business. So understanding that at its core, and understanding the type of profiles that you can have, not just lookalikes, but you can do other prospective tactics, I suppose, to actually target them.
Great, thank you. Okay, one from me while hopefully other people are coming up with some questions. Since you mentioned my life stage, yes, I'm a little bit older than Selina, and I think from my background, I used to work in CRM, so maybe about 15 years ago, something like that, maybe a little bit longer. Some of the themes that are coming through about first-party data actually aren't that new. So, for instance, we used to develop first-party data strategies for big CRMs for people in the past, but the collection, storage, and segmentation of the data was always the easy bit, and the activation of the data was always the hardest bit back then. And I still don't feel that it's got to a point where it's easy. So are you seeing Google, Facebook, other platforms make improvements in the way they can integrate data for activation?
Yeah, like I do think there's still very, very far to go. In all honesty, I don't think it's a surprise that Google pushed back the delay or the removing third-party cookies, and that's probably for a reason, in all honesty. But they are making it a lot easier. Like if you think about 5 years ago or so, like we didn't really have access to doing lookalikes or similar audiences or matching in any way. So it is definitely getting there, but I don't think it's necessarily ever going to be perfect. And especially nowadays when we have, users opting in and out of tracking and that kind of stuff, it really does make things difficult. But I think the mindset from businesses is starting to shift, as we saw through the graphs, the level of investment that they're making, and from a prioritization perspective. Sorry about that. So that is improving. So I think naturally everything else will catch up the way the businesses are prioritizing it.
Yeah, thank you. It's interesting actually, because I think Seth Godin was one of the people that was first predicting this would happen probably back in the early 2000s, saying that third-party data would be taken away from us. And then the guys at Marketing Over Coffee, which was one of the first major marketing podcasts, they went on about it for years and years. Stop relying on Facebook, stop relying on Google, build that first-party data set, because they're going to take it away at some point. So on that note, Kirsty has asked a great question. Why do you think companies are using third-party data so much more than first-party? Is it just because it's easier, or is there a lot more to it?
Honestly, I think it's just laziness. Like it's all there for us to access quite easily, and it is it is the easiest way to kind of get, I guess, the breadth and scale that businesses need. And like I mentioned at the beginning, that the scalability of first party data is a lot of reasons why there are hesitation to kind of go full down that path. But it is a case that it is what we've always done, and those kind of things. And the fact that, you know, you got the browsers kind of shifting and stuff like that is what's really kicked people up the arse, in all honesty. But yeah, it's just easy to do third party because you don't have to do anything for it. Just go target it and that's it.
Excellent, thank you. Do you think there's going to be more technology popping up which is there to serve the consumer on the value exchange? So I've seen a few concepts coming up where the user gets a royalty on the use of their data. And I've seen that applied in slightly different models now. Do you think that's going to be a biggie?
Yes, well, definitely. Like it's, I think if you think about subscription-based model, like look at, you know, streaming services, you know, obviously there's technology component of it, but I think that a lot of businesses are putting it forwards where, or like think about news publications where there's almost a sign up gateway now where you can't access the content without it. So really a lot of businesses are prioritizing this first from a technology perspective to make sure that people are actually providing some level of value to actually collect that information.
Great, thank you. So there's one more question here, which is on your slide exhibit 4. That sounds very forensic. Showing us cases. Can you explain that in greater detail?
Slide 4 was about me, so I don't know if that was the case. It was about Hurricane Sandy. I feel like that's not what it was about.
No. So you slide on exhibit 4.
Let me have a look. Is it about
oh, sorry. No, carry on.
Which of the following categories of data best fits these statements, which is about the way that businesses use first party data? Is that what it is, Melina? Use cases.
Use cases. Okay, I think there was some auto correction going on there towards the end.
Towards the end, sorry. Okay, let me go back. Oh, okay, I'm with you now. Sorry. So it's the maturity element of it. So the way that people are actually using this information, let me just grab it in front of my head real quick. Yeah. Okay, so it's how they're actually using it. So a lot of businesses, I feel, naturally kind of understand who their audience is and the definition of it and how they're actually the fact that they are targeting it. So I think that's naturally happening in a lot of businesses. But when it is, you know, as an example, one of the more multi-moment or mature options was a single customer view. So that's really when I'm thinking about DMPs. So obviously, if I go through at the moment, I could appear as multiple people, depending how you're collecting that information and depending how I've accessed a particular website. So it could be through my phone and then my desktop or whatever it might be. Whereas, you know, things like DMPs will really kind of dedupe information to allow you to have a single view on a single user and collect that information and use it accordingly. So that's kind of where it's kind of moving towards, where if you have a database and you just blast out ads, it's probably not super mature in many ways. But if you're personalizing the content based on who you're targeting, that's when you start moving towards a multi-moment level.
Excellent, thank you. So there is another question here from Matt. I think we've got time for one or two more. So if there are any more, please get them on in the chat now. The one from Matt says lots of SaaS are getting traction from first-party data, in particular CRM integration with platforms, and he's mentioned Get Census, High Touch, and do we think we're moving in the right direction on those?
Well, I think like the slide itself about the level of investment that businesses are making in the space is naturally causing such an influx in SaaS products and those kind of things. And there is no point in collecting this information if you can't integrate it anywhere, or if it's a clunky manual exporting system. So it naturally is moving in that direction quite quickly. So yes, is the answer.
Excellent, thank you. So are there any other questions from anyone else? No, it doesn't look like it. So Selina, thank you very much for your presentation. Again, informative. This was the second part of the topic. So if anyone here wants to hear more about this topic, which I'm sure they will after that presentation, we will send around the notes, which include the information on the first presentation. Unfortunately, there wasn't a video because I was in charge of recording it, and that's what happens when you put me in charge.
I'm going to follow up, Paul.
Sorry?
There is. It's on the blog.
There is
There's
now.
a video.
Fantastic.
Selina did another one. Thank you, Selina.
Thank you, Selina. So yeah, we will send that around as well, so you can view the whole topic in its entirety. So Selina, thank you very much for your presentation. Really informative, and I'm sure everyone got a lot of value out of it here. And for everyone on this call, what we'll do is we'll get the video prepared. We'll get the slides on the website, and we will send it around to everyone as soon as that's done. Thank you, everyone.
Bye, guys.
Bye-bye, everyone.